at the security conference.
Well, Beatrice, just as you've been saying, the president made it very clear that his government would procure more modern military equipment now for the military, for the troops now fighting Boko Haram. Because in the past couple of days, what we've seen videos, for instance, and that video has actually gone viral in this country now, where military personnel were actually protesting that they were not properly equipped, that they were equipped with well, if you like, old weapons. And so the president has said he is going to ensure that more modern weapons are procured and provided for the military. He's also made it clear that he's intensifying efforts now to get more cooperation now from Nigeria's neighbors in the Lake Chad Basin country. I'm talking about especially Chad, Niger, and Cameroon. As a matter of fact, the president is due in Chad tomorrow. That's in the Chadian capital of N'Djamena, where he's called an emergency meeting of the heads of governments now of the Lake Chad Basin countries. That meeting is supposed to discuss security. It's all part of the effort now aimed at ensuring that the kind of attack we saw in that community known as Mitele doesn't happen again. And of course, the president promising to improve the welfare of military personnel, because that has always been a sticking point, that these soldiers are not very well paid, and sometimes they do not get the allowances as and when due. So the president has said he's going to address all of that. But one very key important thing coming out of today's meeting, Beatrice, that I think you should know is that the Chief of Army Staff of this country has said that the Nigerian military will change its strategy, that it will now become, that the Nigerian military will now adopt an offensive strategy. All this while, I mean, what we have seen all this while is the Nigerian military going on the defensive. It waits for Boko Haram to attack, and then it repels these attacks. But now the Chief of Army Staff is saying that is not going to happen again, that the Nigerian military will take the war now to the insurgents. So there's every likelihood that we'll see the Nigerian military now, basically going into the enclaves of these insurgents now, carrying out operation, carrying out attacks. And that's what a lot of security experts here have been asking for a very long time. And now the military chief has said that is the strategy that the military will adopt. That's the Nigerian military will adopt going forward.
Well, the change of strategy is one key focus now for the Nigerian army, but also President Buhari is vowing to procure modern military equipment for the army. Yet we know the militants have upped their attacks in recent times because they have restocked their armory with fighting equipment looted from several military formations. Is this kind of investment necessary, or is it yet another burden to the taxpayer with no real tangible results?
Well, I think for the president to say this clearly gives a clear indication that the investment is necessary, and it's a clear indication that, in fact, some of the weapons now being used in the military may not be as modern as we expect. I mean, let's not quickly forget now that for a very long time, especially during the life of the previous government of this country, the Nigerian government tried as much as possible to buy weapons from the United States and some other countries now, and the U.S. blocked that. Not until this government came in that the U.S. government now accepts to sell, for instance, fighter aircrafts to the Nigerian government. So, and this idea of Boko Haram now taking weapons now, seizing weapons belonging to Nigerian or raiding Nigerian military armory, this is also might be an indication that sometimes these stories are exaggerated, because let's just be candid. The fact is that Boko Haram has access to weapons now from the black market, and the bulk of its supply is actually coming from that black market.
All right, Deji Badmus, stay with us for the moment, because we'll be returning to you for more on what's coming up regarding terrorism in Nigeria there. But Egypt as well is scaling up investment in arms. U.S. State Department has approved the sale of up to $1 billion in military equipment to Cairo. This includes 10 Apache helicopters, missiles, missile launchers, among others. In a statement released on Tuesday, the department said this is a way of boosting Cairo's fight against terrorism. In February, the Egyptian government launched an offensive against militants in the Sinai province. Hundreds of jihadists have been killed and more arrested in the operation. Over 30 soldiers have also been killed. Let's get a deeper take on this now. And I'm joined live from Cairo by CGTN's Yasser Hakim. Daniel Branches is standing by for us in Washington, and Deji Badmus is still with us from Lagos. Daniel, first to you though, the U.S. has reportedly approved $1 billion sale of weapons to Egypt to fight militancy. Give us more details on this.
What they are potentially going to receive, subject to approval in the US Senate and more negotiations there, is one of the world's most advanced attack helicopters, 10 of those, along with all of the US support, technical support, as well as things like night vision goggles and munitions that would be used, Hellfire missiles. That amounts to about $1 billion approved. On top of that, they are also potentially going to receive around $200 million worth of tank munitions. All of this, as I say, is subject to approval in the US Congress, and it is basically comes under the tranche of US military aid, so it's paid for by the US taxpayer.
Yes, President El-Sisi has previously been commended by US President Donald Trump on his efforts against terrorism. Is this reflective, though, in Egypt?
Yes, one thing that the Egyptian president has been targeting when he took office in 2014 was first to eradicate terrorism from the country. Terrorist attacks used to take place on a daily basis, maybe 2 or 3 times a day since 2013. Because of the infiltration of terrorists from outside, and also because of the crackdown by the Muslim Brotherhood, the outlawed Muslim Brotherhood, on Egyptian forces and the extremists on Christians in the country and tourists as well. According to the official figures and the numbers, it has dropped by over 87% since 2016. The number of attacks until now, it has seen a significant improvement. It's very obvious in the streets every day. Yes, there has been an attack once at the churchgoers in Asyut, but most of these, or this attack was in the desert areas apart from the cities, and are not as common as before, and the people appreciate that. Now, that's in spite of the other issues that have been causing some hardships, such as the economic reforms and austerity measures, but the political side, and especially the terrorism, anti-terrorism crackdown has been improving and has been commended by the public here.
Deji, you did mention earlier that the Nigerian army is changing its strategy in its fight against Boko Haram. We do know that the U.S. has also been involved in military support in Nigeria. How helpful has this been?
Well, to be candid, Beatrice, that help has been very, very, how do I put it now? It's been very positive, let me just put it that way. But let's not also forget that that help did not come as early as you would expect it. Under former President Goodluck Jonathan, as I said earlier, the Nigerian government actually tried as much as possible to get equipment. Now, buy equipment from the United States or even from Israel, but the U.S. blocked that, not until this government came to power. Now the U.S. has agreed to sell at least 12, I think 12 numbers now of Super Tucano aircraft, these military aircraft now to the Nigerian government, which we understand the government might begin to take delivery of those aircraft now, maybe from next year or towards the early part of 2020. And the expectation is that when these aircrafts come in, it will help to change the narrative now in the Northeast. And besides security, we've also seen the U.S. support humanitarian efforts now in the northeast of the country. And we've also seen support from the U.S. going to the MNJTF. That's a multinational joint task force now set up by the Lake Chad Basin country. Of course, you know, Nigeria is a key member of that group. So it's been very, very positive. But what most people will tell you is that, look, the U.S. has not done enough, that more still needs to be done to help Nigeria and, of course, the Lake Chad Basin countries to overcome this Boko Haram insurgency.
And Daniel, President Trump has announced the withdrawal of troops in some countries in a budget.
As you know, President Obama was concerned about human rights in Egypt and withdrew or withheld some of the military aid that we now see flowing. And when Secretary of State Rex Tillerson took over, appointed by Donald Trump, he also withdrew or refused to authorize military aid to Egypt on the concerns about human rights. But when Secretary Pompeo came in, after Rex Tillerson was essentially fired from his job, he decided to take a more pragmatic approach. And in August, he issued a waiver to those human rights concerns. In other words, they're not saying that there are not human rights concerns. They are saying that there are more pragmatic or more security concerns for the United States that take precedent. And the fact of the matter is that they are hoping, obviously, that these attack helicopters will be used primarily in the Sinai Peninsula in order to attack the threat coming from Islamic State militants in those areas. And when you have this level of technical support to these helicopters from US personnel, it provides a certain measure of influence over Egyptian strategy in the Sinai Peninsula, enables them to continue to have a fairly decent relationship with the Egyptians. And I think that's why the State Department fundamentally has made this move.
Right. Yasser, a final comment from you before I let you go. That troublesome region of the Sinai Peninsula, though, but how has this support from the United States been received in Egypt?
There are mixed reactions. Obviously, one side knows, and most know, that the U.S. as a superpower, it's inevitable to deal with the U.S. and to accept the aid and military aid, economic aid, and being close to the U.S. In policies. But at the same time, there has been a lot of criticism of the U.S. policies here in the last few years, especially concerning the terrorism crackdown. The aid, the U.S. military aid, is considered here a right for Egyptians, according to the peace agreement signed with Israel by the Camp David Accord, which says that there would be, in return, U.S. military aid to Egypt and to Israel. And blocking that aid is actually blocking or stopping an important component of the Camp David agreement, and the public opinion has been outraged when this was frozen during the Obama time, and we're calling even to break down or to cancel the Camp David Accords. But at the same time, the Egyptian president had earlier, also during the Obama administration, had expressed his concern, that saying that the U.S. has not been helping him in his fight against terrorism, and that he had to turn to the Russians. And he went to Russia, to Germany, to France, where he purchased a lot of weapons and artillery to help in the fight against terrorism and his crackdown in the last 4 years. But right now, I guess this is being commended, that next step, the latest step by the U.S., and Egypt hopes that this will continue, noting that what the politicians here are saying, it has nothing to do with human rights. These weapons are used against terrorists. Apache helicopters are not used, cannot be used against the civilians at all, but only against terrorists in the desert.
Right, Yasser Hakim for us there in Cairo, Daniel Ranches in Washington, D.C., and Deji Badmus for us in Lagos. To you all, thank you very much for joining us on Africa Live. Let's now go to Libya, and a municipal council member who was kidnapped last Friday by suspected ISIL jihadists has managed to escape. Hussein Mohammed was seized together with several of his colleagues after the militants raided a police post in the northwest oasis town of Tazirbu. At least 10 people, including 2 policemen, were killed in the incident. The UN has since condemned the incident, and speaking after his escape, Mohammed said the militants had disguised themselves as members of the Libyan National Army.
My fellow member of the municipal council was with us in the car. They got him out of the car. He was spared because of his old age. I told them that we were with him, but one of them punched me hard on my forehead.
And in other news we are following for you today, the United States has imposed a travel ban and frozen the assets of former Ethiopian intelligence chief Getachew Assefa. He is accused of orchestrating the assassination on Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed in June. CGTN's Girum Chala has more from Addis Ababa.
Getachew Assefa served as Ethiopia's intelligence chief for more than 2 decades. During that time, he has reportedly oversaw thousands of crimes against humanity, including the torture of prisoners and unlawful arrests. He's also accused of turning a blind eye to the gang rapes of inmates and murders in secret jails across the country. The United States has imposed a travel ban on Assefa and frozen the former top spy's assets. He is believed to be in hiding in a northern Ethiopia city of Mekelle, where he had been serving as the Tigray Regional Security Chief. Ethiopian police maintain Getachew Assefa is one of the main suspects in the attempted assassination of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed Ali at a rally in June. Getachew remains one of the most feared people in Ethiopia, and he is still at large. Girum Chala, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. Ebola claims another 19 lives in DR Congo. And Egypt looks at proposals to curb population growth.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca. Among the crowds in Cairo.
Who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile. Along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Nineteen people have died of Ebola in the Democratic Republic of Congo, according to the country's health ministry. The deaths occurred in just 5 days, marking nearly 4 months of the deadly outbreak in the eastern parts of the country. The outbreak that began on August the 1st has now killed 241 people. There have been 421 cases, with 374 of them confirmed. The crisis is centered around the restive eastern city of Beni in North Kivu. Armed conflict in the region has greatly hampered efforts to curb the outbreak. Ebola is a serious infectious disease that can spread rapidly through small amounts of bodily fluid, causing internal bleeding and potentially death. And still in the DRC, where at least 7 people have been killed in an attack that is being blamed on the Allied Defense Forces. One of the killed is a rebel fighter after government forces responded to the attack. The Tuesday incident happened in the town of Oicha in the eastern DRC. The latest raid sparked protests from the residents of Beni, who have also been facing similar attacks. The residents called on the international community to intervene and end frequent attacks by ADF and other militias operating in the region. Egypt is studying proposals to prevent families with 3 or more children from accessing government subsidies. Population growth is outpacing the country's economic reforms. The country needs to limit its population to 112 million by 2030 if the measures are to succeed. Adel Makhroui has more.
With 2.5 million newborns a year and a fragile economy, Egypt urgently needs to cap its population growth. Statistics show that an average Egyptian woman gives birth to at least 3 children, but the government can't adopt policies that forces citizens to limit the number of children they have.
The state is facing a constitutional dilemma. It can't interfere in a person's right to have children, limit or change the number of children a person has. But at the same time, it's not giving equal rights to citizens. Those who have more children get more subsidies than those who don't have children. That's an unfair distribution of the country's wealth.
However, a new initiative is in the works. Members of parliament are drafting legislation that would allow families with 2 children to access government grants, offer additional incentive to families with 1 child, and block those with 3 or more children from accessing any financial or in-kind state assistance. With the average Egyptian family made up of 5 people, the initiative would impact most of the population.
They can't punish us for having children. My salary is $60 a month. I pay rent and barely survive with the rest. I can't pay market prices for goods. Without government subsidy cards, I won't be able to buy food.
Ashraf Morsi heads up a family of 5. Every morning, he helps his son set up their informal sandwich stand, an additional source of income, before he goes off to work. For many families like Ashraf's, the current government grants cover only a portion of their monthly expenses, and without the benefits card, they'd struggle.
It's a terrible idea. They can't let us get used to living with subsidies and then suddenly take them away. They are also doing it at a time when living costs are extremely high. The government should be helping people and not adding to their financial burdens.
Family planning measures have not been officially implemented. However, Ashraf says his benefits have been cut.
The government is already excluding members of families from the subsidy system, even before they introduce this new concept. We are a family of 5, and 3 members have already been removed as beneficiaries. How is that even possible?
Many like Ashraf say that they were surprised to find members of their household excluded from their supply card, or even that the card itself was suspended. They come here to the supply office, try to figure a solution, but many go back in home in vain.
As the government tries to reduce those dependent on state grants, families are trying desperately to register more relatives as beneficiaries. Subsidy programs are the biggest cause of Egypt's budget deficit. The government maintains that if it reaches its target of 120 million citizens by the year 2030, instead of the projected 128 million, it could save at least $11 billion. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has arrived in the Spanish capital Madrid for a state visit. Earlier on Wednesday, President Xi and his wife Peng Liyuan were welcomed with a ceremony at the Royal Palace in central Madrid. The Chinese president has also received the golden key of the city of Madrid from the capital city's mayor Manuela Carmena. During a visit to the Spanish Senate, President Xi gave a speech.
China-Spain relations are now facing new opportunities. China will always look at our ties with a long-term perspective. We hope the 2 countries can continue to support each other on issues of mutual concern. We also want to enhance communication in development and cooperate under the Belt and Road Initiative to improve our bilateral ties.
China and Spain are expected to sign intergovernmental and business deals during President Xi's visit. It is the first trip of its kind by a top Chinese leader in 13 years. On Tuesday, President Xi was welcomed by the Spanish King Felipe VI at the Palace of Zarzuela in Madrid. Both sides expressed a willingness to consolidate friendships and strengthen cooperation. Meanwhile, the Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez welcomed President Xi to his official residence on Wednesday. The 2 leaders witnessed the signing of a number of trade deals. Before this meeting, President Xi laid a wreath at a monument for those who sacrificed their lives for Spain. China has handed over a state-of-the-art library complex to Tanzania in support of the country's education sector. The $41 million project is located in the University of Dar es Salaam. Founded in 1961, the University of Dar es Salaam is the first established and largest public university in the country. The Chinese ambassador to Tanzania, Wang Qi, handed over the keys to the facility to incumbent President John Magufuli in a pompous ceremony in the city. The project began in 2016 and was completed in 25 months. It consists of a library, Confucius Institute, and a Sino-Tanzania Cultural Exchange Park.
This library is a house of knowledge and is a key institution for the development of the education sector. It creates a conducive environment for self-study. But more than that, it allows a person of any income, any religion or political party to study and borrow books.
Kenya's HIV prevalence rate has stabilized in recent years. However, a recent report shows a spike in the rate of new infections among young people, especially girls. CGTN's Wilkista Nyabwa has more.
The number of new HIV infections in Kenya is on the decline. Fewer people are contracting the virus. In 2017, the number of new cases stood at around 52,800, a 32% decrease compared with the year 2000. The improvement is a result of sustained campaigns by the government and civil society organizations. But a worrying trend is emerging.
The Kenya AIDS Response Progress Report clearly shows that the number of new HIV infections in the country is falling. However, the number of new infections among girls aged between 15 and 25 is a rising concern.
Researchers have found that young women account for almost a third of new HIV diagnoses. Experts say several factors put girls at greater risk than their male counterparts.
When you think of things like sexual-based violence, basically gender and sexual-based, you find that really the young women suffer more than the men. We have things like sex for economic gains. So for me, when we look at really things like issues to do with early marriages, will be really more of a transgeneration sex that exposes the girl more than the boy.
University students say a lack of employment opportunities makes girls desperate and vulnerable.
If there's a way girls can be empowered more in the marginalized areas, then that would help. If we can help curb poverty among the youth, because unemployment is also leading to, somehow to it.
34 years after the first HIV case was diagnosed in the country, 1.5 million Kenyans are living with the virus. About 1 million are on treatment. After years of sustained campaigns targeting the adult population, the Kenyan government is now turning its attention to the youth. Wilkista Nyabwa, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Time now to turn to Rama Nyang for a look at the day's business news. Rama.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in business. Zimbabwe's president will have a slight salary cut as the country starts austerity measures. And countries with potential to grow their domestic markets for Islamic finance are also in the spotlight.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's start in Zimbabwe. The country's president, Emmerson Mnangagwa, has agreed to have his salary and that of other senior government officials cut by 5%. The finance minister, Mtulinkobe, spelt out a series of austerity measures when he presented the country's budget last week. He says the country needs to take drastic measures to revive its economy. The salary cuts will also apply to senior executives of all public enterprises and state institutions like universities and statutory commissions. Now, the cuts will take effect from the 1st of January 2019 as part of broader measures by the government to reduce expenditure that has resulted in some pretty unsustainable budget deficits. Among other things, the growth of Islamic banking on the continent is providing businesses with alternative access routes to capital. Moody's has identified 18 African countries with great potential to grow their domestic markets for Sharia-compliant financial products. CGTN's Sumitra Naidu filed this report.
South Africa's first Islamic bank opened in 1989 and has grown significantly since. Today, even commercial banks are offering Sharia banking. But it's the rise of the Islamic bond market that's showing more potential. In 2014, South Africa issued its first sukuk, which fetched a handsome $500 million.
That demonstrated that there was interest in a South African government bond that was along the lines of Sharia. And the importance of that was that we were able to get other new investors to buy into the bonds. So about 56% of the sukuk was bought up by Middle Eastern countries, and it was oversubscribed by about 4 times.
The banking sector in South Africa contributed over $100 billion to GDP in 2014. Around $700 million of that came from Islamic banking.
Islamic banking, whether it's in South Africa or anywhere else in the world, is an alternate to your conventional banking. And it's available to anyone who chooses it, irrespective of their faith.
Interestingly, a large number of Africa's Muslim population is unbanked. Despite a smaller Muslim population, Islamic finance in South Africa is attracting more customers. New legislation is expected to grow this market further.
With the amendment to the National Tax Act coming through, with the issuance of sukuk in 2014, I think South Africa can very confidently place itself not just from an African perspective, but from a global perspective, as a serious contender within the Islamic financial market space.
South Africa has now introduced draft legislation that will grow this market further. Once passed, the new amendment tax bill will differentiate between the terms interest and profit for Islamic banking.
Profit and interest are 2 different terms, but when you use the same tax classification or accounting classification, it causes some sort of controversy. And things like this is currently being discussed, and that's a hugely encouraging factor in terms of the South African financial sector becoming more accommodating towards Islamic banking.
Moody's estimates that the share of Islamic banking assets as a percentage of total African banking assets will rise to over 10% over the next 5 years. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Still in the country, KPMG has named an outsider as the CEO for its South African unit. Ignatius Sehole will be charged with retaining clients after the company's involvement in a range of political scandals. He's currently the deputy CEO of a rival firm, PricewaterhouseCoopers, in South Africa. Now, he does take over from a CEO who's been at the helm for just about a year. Sehole has been brought in to restore the company's reputation. KPMG has been losing clients in the last 18 months. Its internal probe found several flaws in the work it carried out for the controversial Gupta family, which is alleged to have used their links to the former president, Jacob Zuma, to amass a great deal of wealth at taxpayers' expense. The Guptas and Zuma have denied any wrongdoing. The audit firm, in fact, says it's cooperating with authorities and it is addressing what it says are past shortcomings. Over in North Africa, Egypt does not intend to extend its current loan program with the International Monetary Fund that expires in 2019. The country's finance minister, Mohamed Maid, says that, however, the government will maintain a looser relationship, if you will, with a multilateral lender to reassure investors. After years and years of talks, Egypt finally borrowed $12 billion from the fund, and it agreed to float its currency and drastically cut energy subsidies, among other economic reforms. That three-year program, in turn, has helped to pull the economy back from the brink of disaster. The IMF-backed measures have helped to attract billions of dollars of foreign investments into domestic bills and bonds. Fresh capital has also flowed into Egypt, and that has helped to replenish its diminished foreign currency reserves. Outside the continent, Argentina will be hosting the G20 Leader Summit in Buenos Aires later this week. Much of the focus will be on the sideline meetings between the heads of state, especially a planned meeting between the presidents of China and the United States. The hosts are hoping that this summit will serve as a turning point towards economic recovery. CGTN's Joel Richards filed this preview.
Roger Rojas has been working for a food delivery app since arriving in Argentina from Venezuela earlier this year. He was able to start work immediately, but there is a downside to joining the so-called gig economy.
Sometimes you can be waiting for 4 hours for one job, which pays less than $2. You have to be available all day and out on the street.
Workers in this growing temporary work industry in Argentina have now put their collective foot down. They formed a new trade union to argue for better conditions. This is just one group of workers who have protested labour conditions and the economic situation in Argentina.
Economic activity is down, unemployment is up, and inflation is hovering at around about 45% as we near the end of what has been a very difficult year for Argentina. The country has had to go to the International Monetary Fund for a $56 billion bailout. But the government does see the G20 as an opportunity.
Argentina had hoped to show a very different image to the world as it hosts the first G20 summit to be held in South America.
It's very important, and also it's an opportunity for the government in a moment in which the economic conditions in Argentina are quite severe.
Many analysts see this G20 as a chance for Argentina to change the narrative.
So Macri popularity has been damaged during this year, and G20 is an opportunity for the government and for the president to shift the agenda, to start talking about other priorities of his policies, not only the economy, and that start showing that Argentina re-engagement in the world can pay off and can bring opportunities for Argentina society.
The formal agenda for the G20 summit is expected to focus on issues from development and food security to the future of work. But as host, Argentina offers a clear snapshot of the complex problems facing many economies around the world. Joel Richards, CGTN, Buenos Aires.
President Xi Jinping arrived in Spain on Wednesday, the 27th of November. Now, this does mark 45 years since the two countries established diplomatic ties. Hundreds of Spanish firms have set up shop in China ever since. CGTN's Chen Tong has been visiting some Spanish firms in Shanghai to get an update.
Spanish electric supplies company Simon came to China in the late 1990s, and since then has grown from a joint venture company to owning nearly 30 offices and having 2,000 distributors across the country. The company even established a research team last year exclusively to meet the demands of the Chinese market.
Here in China is really helping them, giving a lot of possibilities, taking care of the companies. More business is going to be developed here in China because we can see Chinese people are really interested in our products, in our positioning, in our design. So we believe we can still do a lot of things together.
While the improving business environment here has allowed Spanish companies to expand their businesses, China's release of favorable policies for financial institutions has brought good news for Spanish banks. Bank Sabadell was one of the first foreign banks to invest in China, setting up its first office here in 1991. The Spanish bank provides services including finance and international investment and clearing assistance to both Spanish and Chinese companies. The bank's chief representative in Shanghai says China's new policy of allowing foreign financial institutions to hold a majority stake in local finance firms means a lot to them.
Even if we don't have concrete plans, we could say that in the midterm or in the long run, Banco Sabadell would be very interested in taking advantage of these new regulations for doing more things and in a better way here in China, which we really consider as a very important market for us.
Banking and manufacturing are far from the only areas in which Spanish companies are interested here. More than 600 Spanish firms in industries including agriculture, fashion, and logistics have invested in China. During the recently concluded China International Import Expo, 36 Spanish companies were showing off products in clothing, food, and tourism. The Spanish government is active in encouraging more two-way investments between Spain and China.
The Spanish government reached great importance to the China Import-Export CIIE, and especially appoints a government delegation led by the Spanish State Secretary and Minister of Commerce and Trade to come to China and encourage Spanish companies to participate in CIIE.
US dollars in China, making Spain China's sixth largest business partner within the European Union. China is now Spain's largest trading partner outside the EU. Chen Hong, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
I'll leave you there for the time being. Here's what's coming up at the top of the hour, though. We'll be looking at the land dilemma in Egypt. So the government is stopping house construction on agricultural land, but the units that are being constructed in the market are just way too expensive for most citizens to afford. How do we solve that housing crisis? We'll have some answers for you live from Cairo at 1800 GMT. For now, though, back to Beatrice.
Rama, thank you. And we still have more news for you here in the program. Here's what's ahead. A Libyan couple promotes ancient art of Islamic calligraphy.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival, and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Let's take you to Libya, where the Tripoli Museum is hosting an exhibition of the work of two local Arabic and Islamic calligraphers. Cultural life has slowly been picking up in Libya as the security threat from jihadists declines. Let's take a look.
This is the former palace of King Idris. Now it's used for exhibitions, a rare treat in the Libyan capital, Tripoli. Ali al-Busefi and his wife Zainab al-Bashari are showcasing their work here. The two are on a mission to promote Islamic calligraphy in Libya.
This is our first exhibition and we wanted it to take place somewhere special. This type of calligraphy is not common in Libya, so we are hoping to encourage it as a new artistic technique. We have mosques full of Islamic motifs, the doors, the tombstones, the old city. So why not incorporate them in paintings like this?
Ali is a trained accountant, but has been practicing calligraphy since 2007. His wife is a professor of calligraphy. The pair make a living teaching people how to depict verses from the Quran in the ancient style.
We have lived through difficult times, but our message is that working in the arts is considered peace, because art in the time of war is a means to peace.
The exhibition is receiving widespread praise from art lovers.
I really like the idea that a Libyan calligrapher and her husband cooperate to create art. It's a lot of work. You can spend months on a single painting. So seeing the detail up close and understanding how the artists have dedicated their lives to the practice is impressive.
Calligraphy developed on the Arabian Peninsula after the arrival of Islam. But it is little known in Libya, as former leader Muammar Gaddafi discouraged Islamic culture. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
And now to Morocco and the latest from the International Festival of African Fashion. One Senegalese supermodel has been the face of top brands like YSL and Christian Dior. Khadija Newman has stepped down from the catwalk, but she's spoken to CGTN's Yassa Hakim about her career in the fashion industry and what it takes for African designers to succeed internationally.
I'm from Senegal, Dakar. 1 hour from Dakar is Amber. So my dream was always to work with Monsieur Yves Saint Laurent, work with big designers. So I had an amazing dream, and the dream came true. When I moved to Switzerland, I started my modeling, and after I moved to Paris, and after Milan, and now I live in the United States.
What do you expect out of FEMA here?
You know, LA is not close to here. It's really far away, and 9 hours difference. But when Alpha D tell me about what he's doing, I always work with Alpha D before. When he tell me he's coming here to Dakhla, Morocco to do that, and of course I'm African, the first thing I have to do is support. Everything is from my country. This is a great platform of what he's doing to showing the great designer. What if the other in Europe, of course, when you're in Europe, you have more chance to show your things. But Africa too, that's great. He's doing that to show you can make it and you can do it too if everybody can do it.
You have a model agency in Paris and in New York. Can Africa have its own model agencies that are successful and can discover talent and market these talents abroad?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's my second thing, and I have some idea, and I hope we can do it together. I will talk to Mr. Alpha D about it. When I came here, the woman is absolutely gorgeous. We have the chance to develop our country like everybody, and that's our duty. As we have a chance to go out, this is our duty to come back, to give back. That's why I'm here.
What makes the African fashion unique?
Look at that. You can answer everything. This is a fabric from Africa, from my country, but I design it myself. I have the idea. I want to see my parents in Senegal. I call the young designer there. I draw it. I say, I want you to do it this, do it that. They are so talented that you don't need to be. This is not like a high fashion designer, but everybody, since I get out from my room to here, everybody stopped me to say, oh my God, there was a young designer. He's maybe 20. The guy, 20 years old, he make this because they have the talent. This is just the pushing to showing everything, and I'm so proud to wear it. It's not a mark, it's just a young kid, and I tell him what to do, he do it. They are super talented. We have very talented designer.
And your sports news now coming up next. Here's what's ahead. It's a historic day for South Africa as Banyana qualify for the 2019 FIFA World Cup.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way. Match Point, only on CGTN.
And we begin with the ongoing Africa Women's Cup of Nations, where South Africa will face defending champions Nigeria in the finals on Saturday. South Africa have qualified for their first ever Cup of Nations final. Banyana reached the final by beating Mali 2-0 in the semi-final. Christine Galana and Lebohang Ramalepe scored for Banyana. They will face defending champions Nigeria in the finals, and the Super Falcons edged out Cameroon 4-2 on post-match penalties. The match had ended in a goalless draw. Mali and Cameroon will face off on Friday for a third place. And following their qualification to the final, South Africa's women's football team will feature in their first ever FIFA Women's World Cup next year in France alongside Nigeria. Head coach Desiree Ellis dedicated the achievement to coaches and players past and present, while veteran captain Janine van Wyk admits it is a massive relief to have qualified and believes that the team from the Rainbow Nation's hard work has finally paid off.
We are going to France. We're going to the World Cup. But more than that, you know, it's for the whole of the country. It's for all the players. It's for all the coaches. It's for everyone who has played a part over the last many years.
Yeah, I'm extremely, extremely happy. Incredibly proud of the team, the efforts that we put in throughout the whole tournament. There was never a moment that we gave up, and we knew that this game was the most important one for us to come here and set a target to reach the World Cup. I can now finally say that we have done so, and I'm, you know, over the moon. I'm lost for words. I don't even know what to say.
And staying with football, in the UEFA Champions League, Paris Saint-Germain host Liverpool at the Parc des Princes on Wednesday, with Group C still wide open. Neymar and Kylian Mbappe were both injured during international duty but returned to training on Monday. A huge boost to PSG's chances. When Liverpool and PSG met in the reverse fixture at Anfield in September, Jurgen Klopp's Reds came away with a 3-2 victory. Since that defeat, PSG have beaten Red Star Belgrade 6-1 and drawn 2-2 and 1-1 against Napoli. After 4 games, PSG sit third in the standings with 5 points, and they need a victory to keep their hopes of reaching the knockout stage with 2 games to go.
They play really as a team in every single game, and they're for big influence of Jurgen, of course. And you can see this, and they have 3.5 years together creating this kind of mentality, and this is of course this is an advantage. But we all know it's football, and we will try to make it up with our home supporters and with the confidence, because my team showed a lot of winning mentality. We have now like 14 games in a row, and it's not always easy.
Meanwhile, Liverpool and Napoli are level atop a very tight Group C, a point ahead of PSG. That means a win for last season's runners-up Liverpool, coupled with a victory for Napoli against Red Star Belgrade, that will take those teams through, condemning PSG to a group stage exit. However, Liverpool's recent away record in Europe is a concern, as they have lost their last 4 Champions League games away from Anfield. Elsewhere, Inter Milan will travel to London to face Tottenham Hotspur tonight in Group B. The two sides met in the opening game of the group in Milan, where the hosts stole a late victory despite trailing until the 86th minute. A draw tonight will be enough for the Italian side to progress to the knockout stage. After dropping points away to Inter in the opening game of Group B, this has become a must-win game for Spurs. Should Spurs prevail tonight, it could likely leave the second spot of Group B up for grabs, with Barcelona are expected to wrap up the top spot against PSV.
I think it's important because it's going to give us hope, or it's going to give us that game different reality, no? That you cannot fight to go to the next stage for the Champions League. I think it's a decisive game. It's a must-win game. But I think for me, all the games are so important.
A German court on Tuesday convicted a man on 28 counts of attempted murder following an attack on Borussia Dortmund's team bus in April 2017. The defendant, who has been identified only as Sergei W., in line with German privacy rules, was sentenced to 14 years in prison by the Dortmund State Court. One player and a police officer were injured when 3 explosions hit the team's bus as it left a hotel in the western German city for a UEFA Champions League game. Prosecutors allege that W took out a loan to place a bet that Borussia Dortmund's shares would drop in value, then bombed the bus and tried to disguise the attack as Islamic terrorism. The Association of National Olympic Committees ANOC General Assembly opened on Wednesday in Tokyo, overshadowed by a corruption case involving its powerful president, Sheikh Ahmed Al-Fahad Al-Sabah. Under pressure from a pending criminal trial in Switzerland, Al-Sabah stepped down temporarily on Monday as head of ANOC, which had been due to re-elect him unopposed on Wednesday. The Sheikh, who is accused by Geneva public prosecutors of forgery in an alleged faked arbitration case involving 4 others, is a long-time ally of IOC President Thomas Bach and has often been called the kingmaker of Olympic elections. Sheikh Ahmed spoke briefly at the opening but made no mention of the case.
Thank you, President Bach, and I assure you that the NOC always will be the supporter of the movement, and we will be always a main stakeholder to support all the resolution and all the game which will be decided by the IOC, because we believe in the unity of the movement.
And we'll leave it there on this edition of Africa Live. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contact on your screen and follow us on our digital media platforms. Thank you for watching. Ramanyang is up next with Global Business Africa. But from me and the team here on Africa Live, bye-bye and thank you for staying tuned.